All right, so I performed an assessment on a 22-year-old African-American female that just had a C-section. This was her first birth. It was her first birth right here. So she literally was just admitted to the floor at 10:10 after coming out of that C-section. She was on hold there for a little bit. So come here. One hand behind you. How's it going today, ma'am? You doing all right? Great. Well, my name is AD. I'll be your student nurse today. So, clothes on. How are you feeling today? I know you just got to the floor after that C-section. Good. All of that. All right. And let me just see your wristband real quick. All right. And then her wristband and everything that matched the chart what the nurse gave me. After communicating with her when I came in, she was alert and orientated ×3 on both days. So now I'm just going to perform a quick vital sign check on you. All right. So I assessed the vital signs on day 1 and day 2 before performing my assessment right after. So the findings on day 1, her blood pressure was high and outside the normal range because it was 146 over 98, which is outside of the normal range, which is 50 to 89, and then her diastolic was a little high too, which is outside the normal range from 50 to 89. Her pulse was 69, which is in the normal range from 50 to 90. Her O2 was 100% on day 1, which was inside the normal range from 95 to 100. Her respiratory was 20, which is in normal limits from 16 to 24, and those are all the day 1 findings. Day 2, her blood pressure was still high, again 135 over 85, again outside those normal limits that I stated. Her pulse was 87, which is inside the normal limits. O2 is 99%, respiratory rate is 20, and then her temperature was 98.3 on day 2, and also on day 1 her temperature was 98.1, which was within normal limits from 97.1 all the way to 100.4. So I did notify the nurse about those with those high blood pressures, and they were aware of that. So now I'll begin my assessment. Listen to her heart rate. Listen to her respiratory. All right, man, let me see. Can I sit you up just a little bit? You okay with that? All right. So when I auscultated her chest on day 1, her heart rate was strong and bounding. I can hear it very well with S1 and S2 sounds. There was no signs of any palpitations right there. Her respiratory sounds were clear anteriorly and posteriorly, and also bilateral on day 1 and day 2. There was no sounds of any adventitious sounds like wheezing or bronchi, anything like that. So that let me know that she didn't have any she was at risk for pulmonary embolism or had that. And also her respiratory was regular, unlabored, and it had some good contractions into it, so it was at a good rate. And also, you mind doing a spirometer for me? So she performed the spirometer on day 1. She did 5 breaths up to 1,500 milliliters. Day 2, she did 5 breaths again and got it up to 1,500 milliliters. And now I'm just going to assess. All right. So I assessed her arms. Her skin was warm and dry, and the color of it didn't indicate any cyanosis. Since she is an African American female, it wasn't that gray dusky color. And then her pulses were strong and bounding and regular bilaterally, and then also her capillary refill was a spontaneous, almost so less than 1 second in both hands. So it lets me know she's getting adequate perfusion to the tissue. So I assessed her IV site on day 1. She had oxytocin and lactated ringer solution infusing together at 125 milliliters an hour. On the second day, she had an IV lactated ringer solution infusing at 125 milliliters an hour, and that was discontinued on day 2 at 12 o'clock. Her IV site did not show any signs of infiltration, so no redness, swellage, or drainage like that, and no pain at the IV site. So next, sister breast. Now I'm going to cover you. Is that okay? Any pain? No pain? All right. All right, I'm just gonna cover you back up. So after assessing her breast on day 1, it was soft on both bilaterally, and the nipples were intact. Her nipples were, her breast was the appropriate color for her ethnicity, and her nipples were just a little bit darker than her skin. It was not cracked or damaged or anything like that. She indicated no soreness in her nipples or breast, and no mass indicated, and no signs of mastitis. So, all right, and she is also a bottle feeder. She's not breastfeeding. So, now I'm just gonna cover you again a little bit more. Listen to your stomach sound. Any pain? Pain there, okay. And also, have you had any bowel movements since you've been here? No, you haven't? Okay. And also, have you eaten anything today? Okay. All right. So I assessed her bowel sounds on day 1 and day 2. They were both normal, active in all 4 quadrants. There was slight pain when pressing upon her abdomen on the first day because she was fresh out of that C-section. On the second day, there was no pain. She hasn't had a bowel movement since she's been in there on day 1 and day 2. And ma'am, have you eaten anything today? Okay. So when I asked her about her diet, she did tell me that she didn't eat anything on day 1 because she was told not to because she was having a C-section. On day 2, she did eat 100% of her breakfast, and no signs of nausea and vomiting, anything like that after she ate. So after I assessed that right there, I'm gonna assess her incision line from the C-section. So on day 1, she did have a pressure dressing on, so I was not allowed to assess the site directly, but we did look at the pressure dressing, and the pressure dressing didn't have any blooding or drainage on it. So on the second day, I assessed the incision again when I helped her perform a bed bath, and it was absent of redness, edema, ecchymosis, drainage, and it was also being well approximated. So I did clean that also with warm soap and water, and we kind of just wiped gently on that to prevent any damage. So next, assess the perineal. Oh, I'm sorry, the fundus. So, all right, any pain? Okay. So assessing the fundus on day 1, during my first assessment, the fundus was firm midline, descending 1 finger breadth below the umbilicus. We assessed it multiple times that day because we were required to. The second assessment at 10:40 on day 1, it was boggy. We performed a massage to it for it, and it firmed back up. And again, we performed another one at 10:11, and it remained firm, and 1 finger breadth below the umbilicus, and at 12:10 it remained firm, and 1 finger breadth below the umbilicus. On the second day, it was assessed again at 8 o'clock, and it was firm midline and 1 finger breadth below the umbilicus, and it was also midline on those other findings on day 1. So we assessed the peripads right here in the vagina at the same time. So on day 1, the first assessment, when she admitted at 10:10, it did have some light amount of bleeding, and then we changed that pad right there. It was odorless, and it was rubra. So, and then on that 10:41, when it was boggy, it was pretty moderate amount of bleeding right there, odorless, and then it had it was a rubra color too. And then after the change and from the finding from 11:10 to 12:10, that bleeding was light amount rubra and no odor. First, on the second day, I assessed the peripads at 8 o'clock, and the peripad did have a scant amount of it, absent of odor, rubra. And then again, it was assessed and changed when I helped her use the restroom again at 12 o'clock. And then it was light, scant rubra and odorless. So, all right, now I'm just gonna cover you back up right here. Any pain? No pain? Okay, so I assessed her lower extremities. Lower extremities was warm and dry, and then also there was no signs of any warmness or redness around the calf areas on day 1 and day 2. Those findings were consistent, and also her pedal pulses were present on day 1 and day 2, strong and bounding and regular. And then she did have a negative Holman signs on day 1 and day 2. She did have 1 plus pitting edema, just slightly on day 1 and day 2. She did have the compression stockings on, so the compression machine. So next, assess that. And now let me just turn you over real quick. All right. Assess for hemorrhoids. On day 1 and day 2, there was no signs of hemorrhoids at all. So, and also on day 1, I helped her. On day 1, she did not move at all, so I was unable to assess her gait because she was fresh out of that C-section. She had oxytocin running in, so her muscles were a little bit shaky, weak, and fatigued. On day 2 at 8 o'clock, I helped her go to the restroom. She required maximum assistance. She was unsteady gait, weak, and fatigued, and then we did that throughout the day. Her body still remained kind of sore, and she was fatigued from that. Her urine output was on day 1, 500 milliliters throughout the shift since she got in from 10:10 all the way up until 12:10, and I notified the nursing instructor about that. And then also on day 2, when I helped her get up to void the first time at 8, her output was 800 milliliters. The second time it was also 800 milliliters, and the last assessment it was 900 milliliters, and it all was clear, no odor present or anything like that, and it was and she had no dysuria when she was urinating. She didn't complain of any pain with voiding. So I did help her perform that bed bath, like I said, and clean the incision. And so last thing is that we talked about her admission and any fears, anything like that. She did tell me she was kind of scared. This was her first baby right here. She never had a C-section, but afterwards she said it wasn't as bad as she thought it would be, and she was a little bit concerned about the baby birth weight because it was 4 pounds. So she was constantly bottle feeding that baby, but she was showing good signs of attachment. Her and her husband were by constantly playing with the baby, calling her family members and showing them the baby, and then the father held it and actually played with it a good bit in his crib. And also she did have a good support system, which is her husband and her husband's family and her family. She says she knows a good bit about kids because her siblings have kids, and she has multiple siblings, so that actually she had a lot of experience with babysitting and knows about the birthing process, also through some education that she received online. And then in turn from Erickson, she is at that stage of intimacy because she has showed that she has her husband, and they love each other, and they formed a strong relationship, and she's showing strong bonding with that baby by constantly looking at that baby, holding the baby, and just constantly smiling. She actually called the baby by his name multiple times, so that showed good sign of attachment. She did have some pre-existing conditions. She was obese, and also she had oleohydroanamiosis. I believe I pronounced that right. I don't know if I did, but she did have that. Other than that, that is my assessment. Oh, and then, I would document that, and I did document those findings within the chart and notified the nurses about those within those abnormal findings right there. So, and also she did have some pain, such as like a slight headache on day 2 at 12 o'clock, and I gave her Motrin for that, and her heart rate was just a little bit elevated, and after that, the nurse went in and checked on that. So.